As we just reported, U.S. Homeland and national security officials are worried about how Russia could potentially significantly exploit the current political climate and stir even more distrust in the November midterm elections. Joining us now to discuss, Democratic Congressman Krishnamoorthi of Illinois. He's a member of the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, let's start with CNN's Isaac DeVere. Just reported sources are telling him that Homeland and national security officials are worried about scenarios where Russia could stage small hacks on local elections and purposely get noticed so that would fuel further conspiracy theories, doubts about the midterm elections. How likely is something like this to happen?
I think we should take it very seriously, Jake. I think that the Russians would view interference in our midterms as payback for our leadership of the resistance against their invasion of Ukraine. And so we have to be very vigilant for their interference.
Your colleague, Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger, is also worried about 2024. He says the election will be a mess with judges that are skeptical of election integrity. Take a listen.
There is violence in the future, I'm going to tell you. And until we get a grip on telling people the truth, we can't expect any differently. 2024 is going to be a mess. And wake up, America. Wake up, Republicans, because this is not going to be good for you if you think it is.
We've already seen violence, obviously, January 6, 2021. Are you afraid of even further election violence?
I'm very concerned. You know, I lived through that day along with my colleagues, and a bomb was planted 200 feet from my office window, and we live with the scars of that day even now. I think that's all the more reason why, we have to make sure that these hearings continue, and that the DOJ takes whatever actions are necessary to hold those accountable who are behind and who participated in January 6th. Any delay in that, by the way, will only encourage the very violence that Mr. Kinzinger talked about and that we're all concerned about.
Tomorrow will be the January 6th committee's fourth public hearing this month. The committee says that there's going to be evidence they're going to present that Trump had direct involvement in that scheme to submit slates of fraudulent electors to Congress and the National Archives. That would create I guess in this theory, it would have just created chaos. If they were able to prove such a thing, that Trump played a role in that, is there criminal liability? What would you like to see in terms of accountability for the former president?
Possibly, and it goes to his intent, right? Whether he had criminal intent, whether he had a corrupt intent. And basically what that means is, did he do what he knew to be illegal? And I think that the more that we hear from these witnesses who say that A, they told him that the elections were free and fair, and B, that what he proposed to do was illegal, such as, for instance, having a set of fake elector slate in many of these different states, goes to illuminating his intent and possible criminal liability. So this is very important. The more that we hear from these officials, the more that we gain insight into his kind of mens rea or his state of mind.
There's a new poll from ABC News that has an early look at how the public is responding to the hearings. I do want to note that the sample size for the poll is rather small, only 545 adults. And it was collected on a Friday and a Saturday, which is a very short period of time for people who could respond. Still, be that as it may, the poll found that just 1/3 of Americans say they're following the hearings very closely or somewhat closely. 30% say they're following not so closely. 36% say not closely at all. Are you worried that these hearings might ultimately have little to no impact on the public?
No, I think they are having an impact. I think that in that same survey, what I also noticed is that there's been an uptick in the percentage of independents, for instance, who believe that President Trump is culpable for that day and actually needs to be charged with a crime. I think it's more than 60% of independents at this point, Jake. And so I believe that people are paying attention, 1 in 3 Americans potentially. Would we like to have more? Absolutely. But I do think that it's having an impact in the way that my constituents, for instance, are thinking about January 6th.
Congressman Adam Schiff told my colleague Dana Bash yesterday that the committee still has several high-profile people they'd like to talk to, and interviewing former Vice President Mike Pence is not off the table. Do you think an interview with Pence is necessary at this point?
Not necessarily. We've heard from his close advisors And I think that we know from his public statements what Mike Pence believed about that day and how he felt about the president's actions. It would be nice if he were to testify directly. It would further illuminate, for instance, Donald Trump's state of mind. But I think that the testimony of his advisors and others in his public statements gives us a very, very good sense of what was going on.
Finally, I want to ask you about the economy, which is a #1 issue for so many Americans. You've been urging President Biden to reduce gas prices by using the Defense Production Act. You say the oil refinery bottlenecks are contributing to high gas prices because the U.S. cannot convert crude to gasoline fast enough. Why hasn't Biden done this already?
Well, I think that he's actually looking at it now. We've been told by White House sources that they're looking at our letter and our request for using the Defense Production Act. I think this is absolutely necessary right now, Jake, because right now we're refining about 1 million barrels of oil less per day compared to before the pandemic. And so for any amount of crude oil that is being pumped or has already been pumped out of the ground, if you have less refining capacity, that means less gasoline and it means higher prices. So we should absolutely use the Defense Production Act to at least temporarily reopen a number of these shuttered facilities that were closed during the pandemic, convert as much crude oil as possible that's already available to gasoline, and lower those pump prices ASAP. I just filled my tank today, Jake, and it was not a fun experience, to say the least.
I keep hearing all these ideas being proposed by Democratic members of Congress and left-leaning economists and writers, and every time the response is that the Biden administration is taking a look at it. Does that frustrate you at all?
I think that the issue here is I think they're trying to balance using the right tools to deal with the right problems at the right time. And all things being equal, though, I think that moving expeditiously now is so important because those high gas prices are having the highest toll on the lowest income people, Jake, combined with the fact that so many of these low-income people, these low-income workers live so far from their places of work. It's a huge burden on them to fill their tank just to get to their place of employment. And that's also going to strain our economy further.
Illinois Democratic Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi, thank you so much. Good to see you.